Hello everybody, my name is Offbeat Outlaw. Welcome to a new tier list video. In my last tier list video, I went through every possible option for multiclassing and I ranked them based on how applicable they were as a whole. However, as a lot of you noted, this wasn't really a good way to assess whether or not they were good multiclasses if you weren't a newbie. If it's a newbie, it's a great list to get started with the mildly complicated nuances of multiclassing. However, if you are more experienced, this might be the series for you. In this series, I'm going to go through every class and then compare the various different options for multiclassing to consider whether or not they are good choices. Now, this is obviously because, you know, I'm a single person and I've only got one brain. It's objective. Entirely. I have never made a mistake. No, obviously, I'm gonna make mistakes. I'm gonna overlook things. So please, when you're looking at this list, don't go crazy. Also, I would like to point out that my mustache looks positively evil. Goodness, when you have a mustache, you look like a villain, and there's nothing you can do. But here we are at the list. Would you look at this? Would you look at this delightful thing? We're gonna be going in alphabetical order, starting with the Barbarian. Truth be told, I have not thought about the Artificer yet in terms of all of its options, but I thought about the Barbarian this week because, you know, I kind of forget the Artificer's a class sometimes. I'm not gonna lie. Can you, do you know any Artificers? I don't. I know some outright Barbarians in real life, though, so let's get into it. So I'm putting the Barbarian multiclass, aka taking all of your levels in Barbarian, and I'm putting it into B tier. So how this list is going to work is if you are ranked higher than the Barbarian, you are considered a better option than just pure leveling up. If you're ranked lower, this means that you may as well just be a Barbarian. Without further ado, let's get right into the list. So, kicking things off, let's start with the Artificer Barbarian multiclass. Now, where might you put this? Well, we get some point, you might give yourself some items which can help increase your ability to rage. Give yourself +1 swords, +1 weapons, +1 shields. So you might think that it's an A. You can get yourself Bag of Holding. It's a useful multiclass all in all. But we come to the issue of not being able to cast spells whilst in your Barbarian rage. This is going to be a huge factor when considering the spellcasting multiclasses. When it comes to being a Barbarian main class and then spellcaster multiclass, you're gonna find those two clash a lot, and as a result, I'm gonna be docking spellcasters a lot because of this. With the Artificer, though, because of the relevant subclasses, that being the Armorer, the Eldritch Cannon, and the other various subclasses, their subclasses are useful within their own right and give you another use for your bonus action. And it can provide some necessary bulk, which is what Barbarians are supposed to do. It can help give you some movement and some damage. So as a whole, if it was without the fact that it was a spellcaster and that's its main thing, I would put it in A tier. But because it does have the spellcasting and you can't do that whilst raging, Artificer is going to be a B tier multiclass. You're not going to be hindering yourself in any major way, but I don't think it's necessarily your best option either. Next up, we have the Bard. Now, where might we put the Bard? And now, if you remember my initial tier list, I put the Bard as a God tier multiclass option, and I stand by that. The Bard is a God tier multiclass option, giving you expertise at level 1. And also, there's subclasses for nearly everybody, with blade flourishes for your melee casters if you're a College of Swords Bard, or if you're a College of Valor. However, yes? Alright everyone, I'm back. I changed shirts because I ate dinner and I'm incredibly messy. I was saying something about Bard. Jack of all trades is an excellent class feature that you can slap onto anybody. Being able to give inspiration as a bonus action is incredibly useful. Now, and all of this alone would be enough to put it into God tier. However, there's one issue, and once again, it's that spell casting thing, man. It is that spell casting feature from this class, and as a result, because you can't use about 70% of what the Bard gives you, the multiclass just isn't as effective as you might want it to be. It does not work in conjunction very well with the Barbarian. However, if you take a small dip, there's a subclass for everybody. It is still incredibly useful. A tier. Next up, we have the Cleric. If you remember to my first video on how good they were in general, I ranked the Cleric in A tier. Does it stay in its current spot, or is it going to go higher or lower? Let's think about it. Once again, another full caster class. This does not go in its favor. However, the spells that you do get are quite useful. Spells like Contagion. You can be a better tank now because you can use Cure Wounds. Couple this with some great subclasses, it can help you do extra damage on all of your attacks. So the Cleric does have some good options which can carry over to being a good subclass as a whole, a good multi-class as a whole. However, it does not have as good early boons as you might want it to be, with a lot of its benefits being the spells that it gets. And with that being considered, considering you can't use it half of the time that you're playing the Barbarian, I'm going to have to put the Cleric into C tier. I know it's upsetting. I'm sure there are some good ways to use it, but in my opinion, I don't think the Cleric is your best option. I don't think it's your friend anyway. However, if you get to high enough level spellcasters with Clerics and you manage to get the spell Greater Restoration, it can be quite useful to relieve points of exhaustion. However, at that point, you're basically a Cleric and you're not really a Barbarian anymore. Next class, the Druid. The Druid gives us a few interesting things about it. First of all, Druids are great tanks. The Moon Druid is an excellent subclass. However, the Moon Druid is also an incredibly good class as a whole. Another full caster class, with Wild Shape being the only real feature that we get to take advantage of as Barbarians. And the fact that you can potentially Wild Shape and the fact that you can Rage whilst... Actually, I need to look this up. I don't know. Can you rage while in Wild Shape? Yes, you can rage while in Wild Shape. Yes, you can, in fact, rage while in Wild Shape. So that's a pretty useful feature. However, it's not the most useful. So, and I don't really think you're getting more out of being a Druid. So I'm going to have to put this Druid into C tier. Next up, we have the Fighter. Now, the Fighter, as we all know, I'm a Fighter main. I love the Fighter. I'm very biased towards the Fighter. I think it's easily the best multi-class across the board. And with the Barbarian, it's another martial class. It's another class that fits right in with what you're doing. Action Surge easily, it just doubles your attack output. All of the Fighter subclasses work great in conjunction with almost every single Barbarian subclass to allow you to be a better tank, a better damage dealer, a better whatever you want to be. The Fighter is just the premier choice if you want to play a Barbarian for your subclass, for your main class. So if you want a good multi-class option, the Fighter is the god tier pick for your Barbarian instantly. And that's all I really need to say. The Action Surge speaks for itself. Battle Master speaks for itself. If you don't agree with me, you're wrong. Not really. If you disagree with me, leave a comment. Next up, we have the Monk. Now, the Monk, this is going to be a potentially controversial choice, but in my opinion, I think the Monk pairs the worst with the Barbarian, solely because there's a lot of overlap between their abilities. You see, one of the main things you get from being a Barbarian is unarmored defense, and then one of the next main things you get from being a Monk is unarmored defense. However, those two effects can't stack. It's a shame, but you can't stack two different unarmored defense things. One of the Monk's main abilities is gone. Next up, key points. Key points become more effective the more you have. However, this is your multi-class. You're not going to have a lot of those. So, it's already into C tier. And now, all you have are some alright tanking abilities. As a whole, it's just not good. It's just not a good choice. I think it's just not the best choice for I think it's the worst choice for your Barbarian. This doesn't mean that you can't do interesting things with it, or that your Barbarian Monk character that you've made is bad. It just means that if you're specifically going for damage, it's not the most optimal choice. So D tier it goes. Next up, we have the Paladin. Now, the Paladin is really cool. I'd say the main reason why you want to be a Paladin as a Barbarian is Divine Smite. Divine Smite is not a spell. A lot of people think it's a spell, but it's not a spell. It is a class feature. It costs spell slots, but it's not a spell. Divine Smite is not a spell. Thank you, good night. Which means that you can use Divine Smite while in Rage. this is incredibly useful. This is a quick and easy way to get a lot more damage into your attacks. You're not going to be using your spells, so all of those spell slots you're getting from being a paladin, those are divine smite slots now for your barbarian, which will instantly bring up your barbarian's damage output, which is an incredibly good reason to pick the paladin. More on that, you get lay on hands, making you a healer slash tank, and all of the subclasses for the paladin are also incredibly useful, meaning that I would be willing to say that this is one of the best combinations that the paladin has, bringing paladin, the barbarian paladin up to god tier, at least with my analysis. Coupled with the fact that barbarians scale with strength, and it requires strength to multiclass, strength and charisma to multiclass into paladin, it works. It seems like this was intended. Next up, we have the ranger. Now, the ranger is obviously a very controversial class within D&D 5e. Mostly due to the fact that it is incredibly underpowered for the most part, with most of its subclasses being relatively weak up until Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, and the fact that a lot of classes kind of feel like it does its job better, whether it be a tracker, spellcaster, or damage dealer. It struggles to find its place within your whatever party you are using. Now, when it comes to the barbarian, once again, we're at an interesting point where there are a few subclasses that really work with the ranger, and that I think that could potentially make the Barb Ranger worthwhile, especially with Gloomstalker or Horizon Walker. The Ranger as a whole is very underpowered, and you might find yourself better serviced with other options, which is what is making me currently consider the Ranger to be a C-tier multiclass. Coupled with the fact that you need dexterity and wisdom, same with the monk, it's just not a good choice. However, the ranger does have good options for the barbarian, which is keeping it out of D tier currently. Next up, we have the rogue. Now, if you remember again back to the original tier list, the rogue was god tier. Is it still god tier with the barbarian? It's not bad. I'll give it that. I'll say it's at least as good as the bard. Granted, the fact that it gives you expertise, which is incredibly useful. Cunning action, extra movement for barbarians is incredibly useful. The fact that you need dexterity only means that you can raise your AC as a barbarian and then just pick up the rogue multiclass as benefit. At 5th level, your rogue allows you to dodge out of attacks, so once again increasing the tanking ability of your barbarian. The rogue has got a lot going for it. Coupled with that, you can add sneak attack damage once per turn if you have advantage, which you can always get with savage attacker from the barbarian. So I'm going to say that the rogue once again sits comfortably up in god tier. It is a good class to use. Coupling the rogue with the barbarian is an excellent choice, no matter regardless of your party situation. It increases your ability to dodge. It increases your ability to tank while also increasing your damage output and increasing your effectiveness on the battlefield. The rogue is an excellent multi-class. And also, subclasses are all amazing. Next up, we have the Sorcerer. The Sorcerer, a full caster. We know how we've been treating full casters with this Barbarian multi-class tier list already. It is hard to argue that it is better than some of your other options. It is really hard to argue for the Sorcerer. It's a full caster. Most of its job is casting spells fast and quickly. And while spells can often be useful out of combat, in combat, you're going to find them contradicting with what you want them to do as a barbarian. Keep in mind, you are a barbarian main class. Most of your levels are in barbarian. And now with the Sorcerer, it is getting in the way with your ability to deal damage. If you are a barbarian multi-class with a Sorcerer, in combat, as soon as you rage, you may as well lose all of your Sorcerer levels. There's not many innate things that Sorcerers get that can prove to be very useful while in combat. In RP, you can be fine, but you might be raging for the sake of RP as well, to lift heavy boulders or intimidate people. So I'm going to have to put the Sorcerer into D tier. I think while the Cleric has some good options to use in combat, the Bard has got expertise, the Sorcerer just doesn't have it. It lacks the sauce, as it were. We have the Warlock. Now, the Warlock is an interesting class. As you can remember, I ranked it one of the God tier multi-class options when looking at the types of options you might have as a whole. And whilst this is true for most classes that the Warlock is god tier, it might not necessarily be true for the Barbarian. I am pretty sure the Warlock is definitely not god tier. It is not as useful as any of these other classes, as you are losing your ability to cast spells which is what warlocks want to be doing because it's a spellcaster class. However, that does not necessarily mean that it's bad. There is one incredibly useful subclass that may as well be its own class within the Warlock called the Hex Blade Warlock. Hex Blade Warlock is incredibly useful. It allows you to use your charisma on your weapons for your modifier should you be unable to wield them, as well as the fact if you pick up Pact of the Blade, it allows you to use any weapon with this feature. And you can, as a bonus action, activate Hex Blade's Curse, which allows you to add your proficiency bonus to your damage rolls on the enemy that you declare it on. And once you kill that enemy, it gives you more health. So the Warlock, there is one subclass that is so good that it is actually keeping up its current, the Warlock's current position. If we were just ranking some of the other subclasses without Hexblade's Curse, I would easily dump Warlock probably into C tier, probably even D tier. But if we consider the Hexblade Warlock, I am not confident. I am pretty confident that you're going to be basically as effective as everybody else in your party. Basically as effective as being a barbarian. Granted, there are some, and also you can use some useful stuff outside of combat to better aid you. For instance, Catnap will allow you to restore anything that you've lost during your time that you can regain on short rests. There are some spells that are very useful for warlocks to have, even if maybe it's not the most useful subclass. And finally, we have the Wizard. Now, where is the Wizard? Another full class. Another full spellcaster class. I'm sorry to say, but I don't think the Wizard is a good subclass for the multi-class for the Barbarian. It's just not as effective as you'd want it to be. Yes, it can. Wizards have access to a variety of spells, but you can't use any of them in combat. You can only use them outside of combat. And whilst that might make you more useful, it doesn't necessarily make you more useful than a regular Barbarian. Also, Wizards, as well as Sorcerers, have some of the lowest health options out of almost any class available. So, the Barbarian has some of the most health available. So now you've got these two classes that are contradicting each other in what they want to do. Wizards are supposed to be kind of squishy. Barbarians are supposed to be very bulky. So, with this considered, it is very hard to argue that this is a good class to use. So, with that considered, its only real use being outside of combat, I'm going to slide the Wizard down into C tier. And it keeps itself out of D tier because of the wide variety of spells that it can use. There's guaranteed to be a spell that you can use to better alleviate whatever situation you might be in. Well, with that being said, this is the complete tier list. What do you think of it? Do you think I'm an idiot? Do you think I'm a moron? Do you think I'm full of hot gas? Maybe. Probably. But this is what I think for the best options for your Barbarian character to multi-class in. That is right, the Barbarian. This is the Barbarian multi-class tier list. So please feel free to let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Did I rank your character unfairly? Do you think that I could have considered something else? Let me know. I'm very open to criticism, but please use Google. I will joke with you though. This isn't a threat. It's a promise. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. I'm Offbeat Outlaw. Share this with your friends. Join the Patreon if you would like to support me and continuing to be an ad-free, a brand deal-free channel. And get the fuck out of my house.